morning. It's Viewpoint, the program of personalities, politicians, and perspectives. We've about covered them all this morning, haven't we, Mrs. Busby?
Covered the waterfront.
Yes,
we're
did.
very fortunate to have our Senator, Larry Bomke, with us this morning.
Yeah, once again, folks, if you go to all these public functions around Logan County, you can almost bet the farm that you're going to see Larry there.
Good morning, Bill and Judy. It's nice to be on this morning.
Well, the last time I saw you was a very long time ago. It was Monday morning out at the Maple Club.
Yes.
And that was a very nice Martin Luther King breakfast, I thought. Very well done, and I enjoyed each of the presenters very much. It was good of you to come to Logan County for that.
Yeah, I enjoy that. That's my second year in attending the Martin Luther King breakfast here. There is one in Springfield. I do attend it on occasion. Actually, I've attended it every year, but the last 2 years, I've been here in Logan County.
Well, and the other thing, Judith, if you go to the Veterans Day service or ceremony somewhere, there will be Larry standing around the periphery, not pushing way up to the front. He just comes and makes his appearances, and we appreciate that, Senator.
So it's part of being a public servant.
Well, we understand that you know that. Some folks don't get that, though. Not all your colleagues are as good about that as you are. You were going to make a comment, maybe a kudo about the Martin Luther King breakfast, Mrs. Busby.
It was very well attended, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
And Kathy, Kinsey, Tiffany, Joyce's daughter, of course, was the one who headed it up. And she is so her mother's child. Joyce was very well respected and very well loved in this community, and she's gone to heaven. And her daughter is continuing on with her work. And hats off to Kathy. She doesn't mind working 28 hours a day and 8 days a week, just like her mom.
Yeah, she is. Well, really, I think it was very, very successful. One of the offshoots of the Martin Luther King breakfast, an announcement that was made that Henry and Ida Johnson, Ida was former teacher here at Community High School, and Henry was associated with the Department of Corrections and has his minister's degree. And Henry and Ida have seen fit to develop a scholarship at Lincoln Christian University. And I think that's a very neat thing, and I hope that will flourish and become a really important thing. Just a nominal start is a great idea, and we sure appreciate their being there. Judith just let the cat out of the bag again. Another thing that I'd like to mention is I've talked about it before, the honor flight business where they would fly veterans out to Washington, D.C. to see the memorials. And the purpose of my mentioning this morning is that they were now, we're getting out of here. We're getting off this earth at a pretty alarming rate now at this age. And they worked their way down where they would be able to invite Korean veterans first as they work through there. We're going to get ourselves down to those young men and ladies who served so well and so capably in the Vietnam fiasco. So they're going to open it up to the Korean veterans, and I think that's a wonderful thing. Now, Senator, let's just throw the mic open to you for a minute. And what particularly would you like to comment about in regards to the session that just closed? Anything monumental or
well, there were a lot of things done. I mean, quite a few things.
Besides the tax matter.
Besides the tax matter. Two issues that were extremely important to Republicans. One was accomplished, the other not, and one was Medicaid reform. There was a significant legislation passed that will save millions of dollars. We're estimating about $500 million a year in Medicaid reform, and putting Medicaid recipients in a managed care program, not unlike what most other people have. In addition to that, checking the qualifications, verifying whether they requalify or not. Currently, under Kid Care, for someone to qualify for the program, they only had to show one paycheck, one pay stub. It could be the worst pay stub of the year, but that qualified them. The next year, they would get a letter from the department asking if they still qualify. They simply answered yes or no, and if they didn't answer, the department assumed they still did. So there will be verification. That alone will save about $350 million a year. It's anticipated that about 15% of those are on that program, in that program, do not qualify. So we figure, I think there was a study done that indicated 15% didn't. So if we get at least 10%, that'll save about $350 million a year. So that was significant.
I reckon.
That's very significant.
Yes, it is. Workers' compensation, that's going to be a little more difficult to achieve, but we are not competitive with the other states. Our rates are extremely high here in Illinois, making us uncompetitive. Now, not the argument, but the fact that the significant income tax was increased, that if there's any positive, it could be that there will be such outcry that it will require the Democrats to come back to the table to address the workers' compensation issue. If businesses start leaving the state, that's one way of retaining them and neutralizing that tax increase with major workers' comp overhaul, getting the rates more competitive. So if there was a plus to the tax increase, maybe that's it. Maybe that will allow us to have significant workers' comp reform over the next few months, at least neutralizing the tax increase on businesses. Certainly it doesn't help individuals.
On the scales of justice, how is that going to weigh? We've got to do something. Raising that tax on businesses and corporations, it was pretty drastic. It was quite a raise.
Not to mention individuals.
How far are you going to have to cut the workers' comp? What are you going to do about that?
Well, you just have to be more competitive, the rate. If you can get the rate competitive with surrounding states or more competitive, listen, Illinois is a great place to do business. Chicago, it's an attractive place for businesses. But as long as the workers' comp rate is not in line with surrounding states, it makes it uncompetitive. In addition to the significant tax increase that you just mentioned. But if we can get the workers' comp rates under control, I can only hope that there will be such outcry because of the significant tax increase that it will bring Democrats back to the table. And it's the unions and the trial lawyers adamantly fight the workers' compensation
absolutely.
change.
There's no question about that. Depending upon who's actually getting gored there.
That's right.
What about the unemployment compensation rates, Senator?
That's another issue, Bill. In fact, about a year ago, there was a little letter to the editor in the Springfield Journal-Register from a dentist who had hired an individual part-time, temporary employee, and the employee knew the day they started they were only going to be there for 31 days at the most, that the person that the temp was replacing was on maternity leave and they would be back within 30 days. Well, the employee came back on the 31st day. The temporary was relieved of her duties, but then filed for unemployment insurance and was granted it and collected $6,000 on unemployment insurance. And of course, that caused that employer's rates to go up significantly as a result.
That's right.
And so I attempted to address the issue with legislation. If you are temporary, you know you're temporary, and there has to be a time period within a 31-day period. You know you're only going to... The criteria is 30 days, by the way. If you work for more than 30 days, then you qualify for unemployment insurance. To only have my legislation get held up, I got letters from business groups and the unions saying this should go through the agreed process. There's an agreed process. And it should go through the agreed process where unions and business groups have to agree before it can become law. So it makes it very difficult. The workers' compensation is another issue that would go through normally the agreed process. Legislation would have to be agreed, but the Democrats agreed that this was so significant and so important to the Republicans that they were going to not take it through the agreed process. As it turned out, it didn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
But we can hope that will change.
It was an effort anyway.
There was an effort.
Yeah.
You mentioned unions. I was with a friend Saturday, and she was talking about her daughter, who is in a supervisory managerial capacity and a member of AFSCME. She's with corrections.
Right.
They were in the union. They were brought into the union relatively recently, and it had been 5 years since at that level they've had any kind of a raise. So she kind of welcomed that.
Right.
Well,
Absolutely.
now apparently that's back on the table, and they don't know whether these people are going to be allowed to be members of the union.
Well, there is unfortunately, we have what is called merit comp employees, and that's not unfortunate. There are merit comp employees. Unfortunately, those individuals who are the managers have been treated just shabbily over the last 8 years. Blagojevich would not give them raises, but obviously the organized groups got their raises, to the point that managers who may be putting in a great deal of the time and more hours had those under them making significantly more money. So as a result, the managers started to organize and asked me, who's been very good to state employees, went to them and said, if you organize, you have to take it through the Labor Relation Board. If they approve it, you can organize. So today, I believe about 98 or 99% of state employees are organized. And the reason they are is because of how shabbily they've been treated over the last 8 years. As you mentioned, Judy, many haven't had a raise in 5 years or so. Now, what's in question, there was legislation that passed the House that came to the Senate to take that right away from the merit comp employees and put them, deorganize them, I guess, for no better term, and maybe put them back at the same salary they were before. Well, that's not fair to those folks. I mean, they have every right to a pay increase as those working under them. If they get it, they ought to get it.
648-5510. If anybody has any questions for our Senator Larry Bomke or any comments they would like to make, 648-5510. I'd like to jump off on another tangent for just a minute, Senator. I noted that Dick Durbin weighed in on the capital punishment business this morning. Yeah. I have some strong views about that, and I think there are times, and now he's at the federal level, that's what he's discussing, at the state level. I believe there are cases that merit the death penalty.
There's no question, Bill, and I think we have the same feelings, strong feelings about capital punishment. You know, I think probably one of the most compelling arguments made during the debate was Senator John Milner, who is a former chief of police in the suburban area. But he actually was talking about, it's a Representative Sesha. Representative Sesha is a former FBI agent, and Sesha happened to be on the floor when we were debating it in the Senate. Sesha talked about a kidnapping case where an 11-month-old little boy had been kidnapped for ransom. They caught the kidnapper, but he refused to tell them where the little boy was until he found out. He wasn't aware that Illinois had a death penalty, and he immediately told them. They found the little boy. The little boy was soiled, had cried himself out, was dehydrated, had bug bites, but he survived. Had it not been for that tool, that little boy
never showed up.
Would have never shown up, or they would have maybe eventually found him, but we know he would have been dead. It's a great tool for prosecutors. Every prosecutor, including yours in Logan County, your state's attorney, contacted my office, as did my other two counties, Sangamon and Menard County, indicating they did not want to lose that particular tool. But if there was any more compelling argument to be made, that was it. You know, the other side will argue there have been people put to death that are innocent. I don't know that that's ever been proven. We do know there are those who have been on death row. Randy Steed, I believe it is, from the eastern part of the state, was on death row for about 12 years. He came to see me. And he makes a compelling argument. My daughter, as you know, is in the communication business. When she was locally here, interviewed he and his attorney, and he remembered that. He makes a compelling argument. He was innocent of committing a heinous crime of killing 2 people, but found innocent. You know, my statement to Randy was, Randy, you could be the example that the system works. You know, we did find out that you were innocent. And listen, there could be nothing worse than to find someone guilty of murder that is innocent and be put to death, and the shame of it all when you're innocent. We don't know that we've ever done that.
The possibility lingers out there, but the compelling arguments to keep this certainly overweigh.
In my opinion, they do.
Well, in mine too. I just feel very strong about that. And another thing, while we're in that particular area, gun control.
Yes.
That's a pretty hot issue.
Well, it always is. It's a hot issue. You know, and many folks around here would like the concealed carry law passed. I support the concealed carry legislation, but it's probably not likely that it will occur. You know, the argument is we have fewer veterans, Bill, and fewer people who grew up with guns, as did I on the farm. People are afraid of guns, and they think the way to resolve the issue is take guns away from everyone. In a perfect world, that would work.
Yeah, perfect world.
But we don't live in a perfect world, and we know those who have sinister intentions will still get the guns.
Well, that's the issue right there, Senator. If that's my bent, if I've decided that I want to acquire a firearm of any kind, it may take a while, but ultimately I'll be able to get one.
Sure.
You cannot legislate morality.
Right.
Now, I think that for somebody like myself, or you, or Judith, or Jim, to have an AK-47 sitting around, that's kind of stupid.
Yeah.
Unless it's been fixed so that it can never fire, as a souvenir. But this gun control law, you know, we don't experience it like they do in the Southwest and the South, or in the West.
Right.
So we're probably a little luckier here. But you can't legislate morality.
No, you cannot. And you know, the chances of a concealed carry law, it's going to be way down the road with the makeup of the General Assembly.
Yeah, I'll be out here before that happens.
Both of us will be, maybe, Bill. But, you know, it's unfortunate, but that's just kind of the way it is.
Well, somebody might disagree with us out there, and the number would be 648-5510. Judith, you were going to say something because I wanted to ask about reapportionment.
Okay, I'll be quick. The other day I saw a news clip of Judy Bartopinka talking about the redundancy of having both a treasurer and a comptroller, and why didn't they give up one of those offices? And I'm sure that redundancy is repeated in state government. As things go along, they evolve, and as they evolve, sometimes they become much more complex.
Right.
Is there any way, now that you've raised the tax, and I can see that had to be done, because we seem to have a little bit of a debt problem here.
Right.
However, I'd like, as a trade-off for that, for us to do a lot more of what was done with Medicaid, and look at these things seriously, and see what the state can do for itself to cut down on this debt. What's the chance of turning back the clock a little ways and seeing if we can't do more of that? Is there a lot of it in the works?
Well, this is not new. When Judy was the treasurer before, it was her intent. In fact, she supported legislation to eliminate both offices, or combine the two offices. I mean, so she was pushing that when she was the treasurer, state treasurer, 4 years ago. You know, the unfortunate thing is a lot of things we do, this is going to surprise you, comes down to politics.
Yeah, right.
I know that surprises all your listeners out there.
I never cease to be amazed.
Yeah, but Democrats see this as a stepping stone. If you have two statewide offices, they've been more successful in electing Democrats to those offices, and they see it as a stepping. At least that's what we've been told. And when we have, it's been on the floor. We debated it in the Senate. I voted to consolidate the two, but it failed in the Senate. But legislation has made it to the Senate floor. I don't know about the House. I don't know that it's ever started there, but at least in the Senate, only to have it fail. So Judy has been pushing that. If, in fact, Democrats are inclined to think that this is a stepping stone and they're not going to allow it to occur, then it's under the current makeup of the General Assembly with a Democrat Senate President and Mike Madigan, the ongoing Speaker of the House. It probably is not going to see the light of day.
But you know, somehow, you mentioned that it isn't a perfect world, and I was wishing it were. I'd like things to be fair, and it
not everything's like Lincoln.
Pardon?
And Logan County, that's perfect.
There you go. It just seems unfair that we taxpayers should have to pay for that, so that some body, regardless of his political background, will have a stepping stone. I don't think that's our job.
No, it isn't our job. And let me clarify. The legislation would allow us to put it on the ballot because the Constitution calls for the two. I believe I'm correct in this. And that simply would allow the people to vote to or consolidate. That's what the legislation, the General Assembly in itself cannot abolish one office or consolidate. It would simply allow us to let the people, we would allow the people to vote on whether they wanted to retain the two, because they are protected by the Constitution. So but you're right, Judy, I agree. But obviously, there are those who feel that the majority of people would say, yes, this is a way to save money. Let's consolidate the two offices. Otherwise, they'd allow it to be voted on.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Senator, another decade has gone by. Boy, do they go quickly now. Reapportionment.
Yes.
We're going to be facing that.
Right.
What are your comments about that, sir?
Well, I mean, it's kind of, for the first time, I think I read the other day, in maybe 20 years, it's going to be done by the General Assembly. Before, for instance, 10 years ago, the Republicans controlled the Illinois Senate, the governor's office. The Democrats controlled the House, so we couldn't come to an agreement and ended up in the courts. That won't happen this time, because there is a Democrat-controlled Senate, Democrat-controlled House, and a Democrat governor. And one would assume they'll be able to get together and agree on a map. So the map that will be drawn skewed towards Democrats over the next 10 years.
Once again, there'll be a significant amount of gerrymandering and going, they'll cut a line right through Logan County like they've done.
They could do that. You just don't know what will happen. Would hope that wouldn't be the case. Actually, I used to represent all of Sangamon County.
Yes.
Now there's a little piece that I don't, that I share with Bill Brady, as with Logan County.
Yeah.
The eastern part of Sangamon County, Riverton, Mechanicsburg, and Illiopolis, I don't have those communities. I have everything else, including, of course, the city. But so we'll have to wait and see what happens. I'm inclined to think that the Democrats won't do much with downstate, with maybe one district. That is a district that they drew up for Frank Watson that runs from East St. Louis to Decatur. It's possible they'll cut that one out and move it up north. I don't know if that'll happen or not, but that was a gerrymander. But they did that because Frank Watson was a Republican leader, or they were anticipating him to be the leader of the Senate.
Go ahead.
Yes, I have a question for you. My husband is on the city council, and he is unable to
And he does a fine job.
Thank you for that.
He does, yes.
And of course, he takes his advice from his wife.
Yeah.
Like, Bill, you do, and I.
If you buy that, I got a used car I want to talk to you about.
Really? Oh,
At any rate, he's at dialysis, so he can't listen to us. But he wants to know what the chance is of there being a new law whereby a city can tax just for the pension fund in non-home rule cities, because 55% of the real estate tax in Logan County goes to the pension fund. That's a pretty good chunk.
right. Well, I mean, the law obviously would have to be changed. I'd have to look into that, Judy. I don't know. To allow a non-home rule community to do that, that's something I'd be happy to look into. Probably the municipal league, it's something that they ought to be looking into. They're lobbying for, but I'd be happy to look into it. I don't know. I mean, that's a valid point. Of course, that then means more property tax and higher property tax, I guess. But that's up to the communities to make that decision.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any thoughts, Larry, about the responsibility you might have to your constituents in issuing new legislative ideas to the Senate?
Sure.
My theory, of course, is less is best, but there are those out there in the legislature who are just up there all the time introducing some silly bill after another.
Oh, yeah. That happens a lot.
Your comments on that, sir?
Well, I mean, it happens too often. We'll be faced with 5,000 bills this year, every year. Now, how in the world could there be a need for changes, 5,000 new bills every year?
Well, why don't you just take the Nancy Pelosi approach and pass that so that you can find out what's in it?
Yeah, well, that's right. Yeah, there's an idea, Judy.
That's my conservative friend here.
Yeah, right. But it's unfortunate that, and there are members of the General Assembly that will run around their communities, and whenever there's an issue, potential issue, I'm going to take care of it with legislation.
Yeah.
I'm filing legislation to take care of that issue. And I could be specific on members who do it. I wouldn't do that, of course. Yeah. And they will file it. And they'll send out a press release. Mm-hmm. I've resolved the problem. I filed a bill to address the issue. Of course, the bill doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
But and that's part of the reason we have so many bills introduced. But it's unfortunate. But it sounds like, I mean, the member's doing a lot for their district.
And it keeps his name or hers, of course, in the forefront.
Absolutely.
And, of course,
and people think hey, this guy is, or this lady is great because this is a terrible situation, and he's filed legislation to take care of it. Never to see the light of day.
I'm happy to say our senator has a different modus operandi than that, and we appreciate that.
Thank you, God,
much
for that.
One of the things I wanted to ask the senator, what do you see in the future here as regards vis-a-vis our conversation about legislation? Do you see anything coming up important in the near future when we go back into session?
They're really, because the hot topic has been the fiscal condition of the state and addressing that, and that has been the number one issue over the last couple of years, 5 or 6, 7, 8 years. And then after Blagojevich and the impeachment trial, that historic situation. There are probably hot issues out there, but I think the key, as far as the General Assembly is concerned, if we're going to pass legislation, make sure it has no cost associated with it, because we still have a crisis. And we've passed a significant tax increase, and I think the last thing people want to see happen is the General Assembly passing legislation that calls for more money and spending some of that new tax money that ought to be going to eliminate the deficit.
And speaking of crises, we're going to have one right here in the Viewpoint if we don't take a commercial break. Go right ahead, Mr. Ash.